Hey y'all, I'm Mia from Mia's Little Farm here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm so happy to be here today with Kellogg Garden. Now we're getting into the latter part of summer and there is a lot of garden maintenance to do. Things need to be harvested, seeds need to be saved. Today I'm going to do some maintenance focusing on my herb spiral back there. Now my herb spiral is where I grow a majority of my culinary herbs, and right now there's things that need harvesting. There's some herbs that have really given up the ghost and need to come completely out of the ground, and there's also a lot of seed saving I need to do. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with my herbs, and hopefully you can take some of the information and use it in your own herb garden. First though, I'd like to give you a quick little tour of my herb spiral, just in case you haven't seen one before. Let's go see. There are many reasons to have an herb spiral in your garden. One reason is that they're just really pretty to look at. Another reason is that you can grow more herbs in a smaller footprint, because with an herb spiral you're growing up, not just out. And a big reason to use an herb spiral is that you can create little microclimates to grow different herbs that require different climates all in the same little area. The top of the spiral, for instance, is going to be drier and warmer. In mine, I've got Mediterranean herbs growing like rosemary. I've got oregano down there, some thyme back there. Towards the front of the spiral that gets the most sun, I've got a big sage plant, which I love because it's really tolerant of a lot of climates. Towards the shady, cooler side, I've got chives and garlic chives over there on the other corner. And throughout the summer, around the bottom of the spiral, I've had different kinds of basil growing, parsley, cilantro, more parsley, more basil. And I utilize the outside of the spiral too. I've had dill, I've had chamomile, yarrow. You utilize all the areas. And around the back of the herb spiral is a little mini pond. And the mini pond serves a couple of purposes in an herb spiral. For one thing, it gives a place for excess water from the top to trickle down. It provides moisture for those herbs that like a wetter environment. And it also provides a nice little spot for my bees and other insects to get a cool drink. I've got zinnia all around my herb spiral. Zinnia are a wonderful companion all over the garden. I like to use them around my spiral for providing shade. As you see, they're shading areas of the bed, and they also provide shade to the mini pond, so it keeps the water nice and cool and also keeps the insects nice and protected when they're down there getting a drink. Now, I built the herb spiral back in the spring. I built it out of Tennessee river rock. Although people use any kind of rock, any kind of brick, you can use logs, you can use whatever you have on hand to build a spiral. Basically, you just fill it with soil and compost and then plant it and let nature take its course. I'll probably end up adding another layer of stone to this next year to make it a little taller, but so far I've been really happy with my spiral. So now that you have a little background on my herb spiral and the benefits of using one, I'm going to show you some of the maintenance that I need to do with some of the herbs I have planted there right now. So I'm sitting out here on my herb spiral. And by the way, that's another great benefit of an herb spiral. You will always have a nice place to sit in your garden. I'm sitting between my garlic chives and a clump of basil over here. Now, garlic chives right now don't really need to have anything done to them. I've been cutting their grass-like stalks and using them all summer. You can use them in cooking, use them as a garnish. They just have a delicate garlic flavor. They're a perennial, so they're gonna come back every year, and they do last forever. I've had this clump probably 6 years. I've moved it a couple times. It always comes back. It's a gorgeous plant. Now, as you see, mine is actually blooming right now. Let me show you. It's starting to have the flowers come in. They're pretty little star-shaped flowers. And it's really great when it goes to flower because it's gonna attract bees and butterflies. They just love it. And you can take these little flowers, you can use them to garnish dishes, or you can saute the whole flower head and add it to an omelet, add it to whatever to give a nice light garlicky flavor. Now later in the fall, the flowers are gonna die back. And at that point, I'll just take some garden shears and I'll cut the garlic chives down. And next spring, they're gonna pop right back up. They're a really simple plant to grow. On the other side, I've got my basil clump here. I've been using this basil all throughout the summer. We've had several batches of pesto. I've used it in sauces and cooking. Earlier in the summer, when I would see little flowers come up, I would just pinch the flower heads off. When basil goes to flower, it puts more energy into creating flowers and seeds, and the leaves will get bitter and not taste very good. After a little while though, I do like to let my basil flower. Again, basil flowers will attract a lot of beneficial insects and they're really pretty. And then of course, when the flowers die back, that's where you're gonna have your seeds. So this used to be full of white flowers, and as the flowers die back, seeds are gonna emerge down there, and you can just strip off the little dried flowers and basil seeds are gonna fall out of there. It really doesn't take long to save seeds from basil. You can cut off the stalks and then just sit there and strip them out while you're watching TV. There's a basil seed. So I'm gonna be going through here and cutting off the dried flower heads and saving basil seed. The one important thing to know, if you want your variety to grow true, you need to separate different basils by at least 50 feet. With different sweet basil strains, for instance, this one was called Emily basil. I don't worry about it too much because I kind of like to live life on the edge. But with things like Thai basil or lemon basil or lime basil, I will separate those so that they will grow true. So that's what we have going on this side of the herb spiral. Let me take you to the other side, and there's a lot of work to do over there. Now I'm on the other side of the herb spiral, and this is where there's a lot of work to be done. First of all, I'm going to take a look at the parsley. I've got 2 parsley plants here. I've got one right over here, and I've got one directly behind me. Now, parsley is a biennial herb, and what we mean by biennial is that it grows over 2 seasons. The first season of a biennial plant, it puts a lot of energy into creating leaves and a strong root system. The second season, a biennial herb will bloom, produce flowers, and then go to seed. Oftentimes I do let my parsley go to seed and let it bloom the second year. It's got a really pretty flower. And if you let your parsley go to the second year, you can also harvest the root, which is edible and delicious. This year though, my parsley is not looking very good. I'm actually pulling this plant up. Let me show you. I don't know what happened. It just kind of is looking a little dead and crunchy. I think next year I need to put my parsley in a shadier area of the herb spiral. Our summers here can be a little brutal. So I'm gonna pull the rest of this parsley plant out, and I was lucky to find a couple basil plants. So I'm gonna put some basil in its place. Now, we still have a couple months until our first frost, so that's gonna allow me to get a nice little harvest of basil. These probably won't go to flower, and of course when frost comes they'll die, but I'll have a couple months of good herbs to enjoy. So that's what's going in right here. The other parsley plant though, I'm gonna let stay. It too has some leaves that aren't doing very good. I'm gonna prune back the most dead looking ones, but let me show you. I'm leaving it because I've got swallowtail caterpillars. Now the black swallowtail butterfly, the caterpillars feast on dill plants, parsley, carrots. So when I see them in the garden, I definitely like to leave a plant for them to munch on. So I'm really happy to see that little guy. So I'm gonna leave that parsley alone for now. I'll probably dig it up after all the caterpillars are done with it. So that's what's going on with the parsley. Then I've got a lot of my perennial herbs back here. I've got my sage and my rosemary. And what I'm gonna do with the sage and rosemary is I'm gonna cut nice little bundles of it, like so. I like to cut branches of it, and then I just take kitchen twine and I'll wrap the twine around and tie it. And then I've got little herb bundles that I can hang up in my kitchen until they're dry. They look really pretty this way. They dry really well. I don't really like leaving them out for decoration though, because they will lose a lot of their wonderful aroma. So once they're dry, I'll just stick this whole bunch into some mason jars, screw the lid on. Then when I need some rosemary, I'll just pull the dried rosemary off the stem. I've got some sage cut already. I do the same thing with the sage. I'm gonna tie the kitchen twine around it, hang it up, let it dry, and then I'll just use the sage directly from the stems. Again, it smells so good. The sage is something that doesn't need a lot of maintenance in the garden. It's gonna keep going through the frost. Once it dies back, what I'll do is the same thing that I do for the chives. I'll just cut it down to the ground, and next year it's gonna grow back just like normal. It's wonderful. Rosemary back here is a little different though. Now, if you're lucky enough to live in a really warm climate like California or Florida, you can grow your rosemary outside all year long. Here in Zone 7, it usually dies back if we don't protect it. So I like to do a couple of things. First of all, I'll take young stalks of rosemary inside in the fall, strip the leaves from the bottom couple of inches. You can stick that in a little jar of water and roots are gonna start to form. Once the roots are nice and long, you can just plant it in a little pot of soil, put it in a really sunny window, and next spring you'll have rosemary plants to plant. I plan on rooting at least 6 to 8 of these guys. It's really easy, it's really simple. Now some people do put their rosemary in a pot and bring the whole pot inside. I find that just ends up looking a little scraggly when you do that. So I just like to take new cuttings and make new plants. The other thing that I do, and I've had really successful, really good luck with, is overwintering the rosemary outside. What I'll do is before the first frost, I'll cut the rosemary down to where it's just a few inches tall, then mulch it really well with straw. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna hold in the heat and protect it from any cold snaps that we might have. Some people I've seen use like concrete blocks or warm stones to put around the outside. I don't go that far, but I am gonna cut it down, mulch it, and hope for the best. And I'll always have my little backup cuttings inside if that doesn't work. Now for my thyme and oregano, those are a little different. Again, these are both perennial herbs. They do really well in my climate. I'll cut them down when they die and they'll come back next year just as strong as ever. With the oregano and the thyme, I'm gonna take them in and lay them out on my dehydrator. I'll dehydrate them at a really low setting. Once they're dried out, stick them in a jar, screw on the lid, and the same thing, when I want to use some, you just strip the dried leaves right off the stalk. Super easy. They smell so good. And I promise you, if you dry your own herbs that you've been growing, it's going to smell so much better and the flavor is going to be so much more amazing than the little bottles and jars you buy in the grocery store. So that's what's going on in this area over here with my parsley and my perennial herbs. There's one more little section of the herb spiral I need to show you. So now I'm on the last side of my herb spiral, and there's lots going on back here too. I've got a little patch of dried out cilantro. I always love growing cilantro, but the leaves really don't last long before it flowers and sets seed. But that's okay, because number one, the flowers are really pretty. Number two, when you have the seeds, they drop off and they'll self-sow and make tons of new little cilantro babies. And then of course, you save your seeds. They're super easy. You pull them off the stem, put them in a jar, and then you have your seeds to grow more cilantro next year. Not only that, but you can take the cilantro seeds, you toast them, and that's the spiced coriander that you use in pickling blends or use in the kitchen. So I always like to have plenty of coriander seeds or cilantro seeds on hand. So I'm gonna harvest my patch of cilantro that I have. I also have dill right behind me. Now this dill pretty much gave up quite a while ago. I've used a lot of dill from it over the summer, and I've actually already saved seeds. I'm sure I'm gonna have lots of baby dill plants here next year. There are thousands of seeds on a dill flower, and they just blow everywhere in the wind, and dill is so easy to self-seed. But the reason I haven't pulled this plant out is there's still a little life left in the stalks, and I found some swallowtail caterpillars on here earlier. So I'm gonna leave this dill here just for the time being. And again, when swallowtail season is over, I'll pull up this plant and put it in the compost. And way back here, I have another basil plant. This is a globe basil plant. So it's a more compact sweet basil. There's still a couple flowers on it back here. It hasn't quite finished its cycle of blooming and setting seeds. So I'm gonna let that finish. And then again, I'll pull the little dried flowers off, and I'll have some globe basil seeds to save and plant next year as well. So that's what's going on in my herb spiral. Back there, the last thing are there are actual chives right back there. Again, I treat those like garlic chives. I'm still using them, and when they die back in the winter, I'll just cut them back to the ground. That's basically all the maintenance I'm going to be doing on my culinary herbs, the seed saving, saving the cuttings for winter. So it's going to be a good day of work ahead of me, but I'm looking forward to it because I love to work with herbs. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Hope y'all have a great day. Bye now.